Value Stream Metrics, today's Flow Short. Hi, I'm Joshua Barnes, and I am joined by Helen Beal. And that is the topic we are covering today. For those of you that are maybe new to these Flow Shorts, what we're doing is we are going through a lot of the great resources that the Value Stream Management Consortium has available to its members. So there's a lot of blog posts that have been written by either members of the consortium or industry recognized experts. And we're trying to bring awareness to all the great content that the consortium makes available. So Helen, as we get going today, is there anything you would like to start off with?
I think, hello, I'm very proud to be here and on time today. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you. It's such a great initiative. And it's May the 1st. So it is the start of FLOMO May, if I may mention that. So this is Joshua's idea. It's Value Stream Management Awareness Month. So I've been working on that today. And this is a great way to kick it off, I think. Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, fantastic. And I am in Florida and Helen is in the UK. So for those of you that are watching live, feel free in the comments, let us know where you're at, or if you're watching this on replay in the future, go ahead and post and let us know where you're at. So value stream metrics, we touched on this a little bit in last week's Flow Short, and I have a couple of metrics that I typically like to work with organizations on. And before I get into mine, I will bring up a Steve tip. Let me go ahead and add Steve. So Steve Pereira could not join us today. He's not going to be able to join Helen and I for the next couple of weeks, but we did want to let Steve actually put something out there. And his tip is don't let metrics become targets. We can get very fixated on very specific metrics that start to lose value, and we can get into competitive situations. And so Steve's tip is to try and avoid that. So thanks for providing that to us, Steve. So I'll start off a little on some of the metrics from a value stream management perspective that I typically like to see. And again, I touched on this last week. One of the strategies that we have in this end-to-end flow approach that we work with in our consulting engagements is to identify a value increment, and specifically a minimum value increment. And that's just a container for the smallest we can do that's going to provide value. And it's all the things that we have identified that need to be done. So enhancements to one or more digital products, any supporting work, any operational work that needs to be done. And the metric that I like to tie into this is the MVI flow time. And that's from the point that we pull that value increment into our workflow to the time that value is consumable. So it's not when the work is done and it meets a definition of done, like we might have at a very low level, like a user story. It's when a release has been made of the functionality or what that value increment is intended to do, and people can actually start using and consume it. So that's a very insightful metric we can use for planning, for seeing how long things are taking, and where we might find delays in the workflow. So I have a few others, but Helen, how about some of your thoughts on value?
I love the MVI. Obviously, it's like a PBI, but it recognises that we are trying to deliver value. So we want an outcome for our customer, and I love the way that you combine everything that's needed in there in order to make that value available. And then we've got the flow time element. So we've got the lead or the cycle time, depending on what camp you come from. So you can measure that from lots of different places, but of course, to measure it as it starts to be consumed and starts to create hopefully customer joy is most important. And I think for me, there are two main types of metrics in value stream management. If I look at the two dimensions of value stream management, we have flow and we have value realization, and therefore we have two different types of metrics. So underpinning our flow metrics are the lead time and the cycle time, so how long it takes us to do things, and then there are the related metrics, so we can look to things like the flow framework and other flow metrics like flow distribution to tell us things about how we're working and what sort of work we're working on. And then we have our value realization metrics, and this is, I think, where it gets very interesting as well, because a lot of people don't think about this so much, but you've got it built in with your MVI because you know that what you're working on is expected to deliver some kind of outcome. The challenge, I think, with those value realization metrics is the type of how you're going to categorize them. So you can have business metrics and customer metrics, broadly speaking. And a lot of people, as we've learned in the value stream management research, we do the state of VSM reports, a lot of people lead with the business metrics. So they're primarily concerned with the health of their organizations. So they look at profit and revenue and those kind of financial metrics. Whereas what we're learning very much is that the customer metrics are the leading metrics that will lead to our organizational health metrics or business metrics. So if we've got happy customers, they will be staying with us, they will be buying more, and they will be recommending us to other customers. So those customer metrics are more important. So I wonder how then, Joshua, in your MVI definition or your design or your use case, however you describe that work you're going to do, how you define what that outcome is that you're expecting to see.
Yeah, and there's a couple of connections here. So one of them is how we are connecting from a strategic alignment perspective. So we want to make sure that the work we're doing in each one of these value increments is supporting something at a increasingly higher level, like an initiative that is supporting a strategic outcome for a particular value stream, which then contributes to an outcome that is desired at the enterprise level. So that's one connection. The other is the type of information for any given organization that we would capture within the context of that value increment, so the requirement of it. And that's where the measurable outcomes come into play. And so we are looking at things that are tied into business value and things that are tied into customer value. And the balance between those and the specific ways, if we're trying to verify that we're putting some new functionality out and are people using it, or are we tying that into something through the customer journey and experience that we can measure. Those are the things in each increment that we may need to make a decision on. And therefore, it's not, oh, we had this quantity of work and we got it done and we released it and it's like gold star to everybody. It's when that is put in the hands of the people that are intended to be able to use it, is that occurring? And how can we measure that? So that's sort of the two spaces that we look at within this particular strategy.
And I think there's a couple of things there I want to talk about. One is the granularity of all of this, and one is referring back to Steve's quote. And anyone that knows me knows that I adore Steve, and I would rarely contradict him. But I'm going to say that in this instance, I think there is an argument to say that we can and should use metrics as targets. And when that happens is when we're talking about value realization. When I totally agree with him that we need to be really careful is when we're just focused on flow. And I can tell you real world stories of clients that I've worked with where, as a consultant, I have been asked to go in and evaluate every team's capability to match up to the DORA metrics. So, we've got the 2 for throughput about lead time from code to commit to production. And we've got what's the other throughput one? The deployment frequency, and then we've got the stability ones around the change fail rate, and the other one, MTTR, so time to recovery. So we've got those 4 metrics. So I've been asked to go into organizations and go to every team and actually find out what their real performance is around DORA. And then make them prove it to me by showing me what's happening in Jira or ServiceNow or whatever it is. And I've been asked to do that because the leadership have decided to make the annual bonuses tied to their performance against those DORA metrics. So hopefully everybody that's listening to me now is like throwing up in the corner or fainting, or is just absolutely horrified to hear me say this, because I was, and I refused to do the work because it went against everything culturally we believe in terms of the way that we should be empowering teams to self-discover improvements and using these metrics in those ways. So that was a kind of an extreme example of my agreement with Steve that we need to be careful to not make metrics targets, and that's a really good example. But if our team is owning our metrics and they are about the experiment we're doing and the value outcome or the value realization that we're looking for on behalf of our customer, that's okay, I think, for that team to target that, make it a goal as something that they're trying to achieve. Do you agree with that distinction, Joshua?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
I forgot about the granularity. If I can just quickly go there as well. When we talk about value realization, you talked about the kind of strategic direction and the cascading of like strategy from the top and the teams doing the work and delivering what we wanted to do as an organization as a whole. And then we talk about MVIs and PBIs, which is quite small increments of work. And I think the teams want to get feedback on their work and know that they're successful. So I think that there are ways, and it is easier in some environments than others. So, for example, I work with a gaming company, and they were online gaming, and they had specific events like a horse race or a football game where they would make changes to the online experience, and they would be able to see very quickly through the digital data about what was happening, whether people were making more bets, whether they had more users, whether, you know, they'd get feedback on people liking it. So they were able to get that feedback, which isn't possible for everybody, but that level of granularity that digital products allow us for in terms of user experience, customer journey time, form conversion, all of those kind of things, in your opinion, is that the kind of quality experience metric people should be chasing?
It definitely is something that they should be considering, right? Because that's one of the things that gives us insight into, for one, are we doing an effective job with how we're implementing some of this functionality? And the other is, should we continue to do more of it? So if we're using something like a portfolio backlog of all of these smaller increments of potential value that we've identified, right? Are what we're doing, are our customers interacting with it and using it and then generating whatever it is we're looking for? Is it, to retain customers? Is it to continue to grow revenue and some of the other things that are more business metric focused? So yes, I think that is definitely something that should be considered by most, at least commercial organizations.
Brilliant.
So I've got one other metric before we run out of time today, and then I'll see, Helen, if you have any. So one of the other things that is, we probably all have metrics or things that we want to see insight into, right? Depending on the type of work we've done or the type of organizations we've been in. And for me, one of the things from a flow perspective is I want to see how often work is going backwards, right? Those handbacks. And is it because we've got quality issues? Is it because we've got miscommunication or lack of clarity in some of what we're trying to do, and so there's a lot of back and forth? Is it a result of a skill gap or a particularly challenging area or people in the organization, or like, what is it? So that type of a metric as well, right? How often we're seeing handbacks and exploring why also is something that I find helps quite a bit with improving our overall efficiency of the value flow.
It's a really interesting metric, isn't it? I have not really used the term handbacks before, but in value stream mapping, we look at the amount of rework that is done in a step, or the amount that is complete and accurate. And I always refer to those two things as mirror metrics, because if something is 90% complete and accurate, it's 10% rework. If something is 90% rework, it's 10% complete and accurate. So you can use it either or. And they're essentially the same as handbacks. And you said there's loads of different reasons why it's happening, but it's all waste, isn't it? It's all waste that is an opportunity to improve ultimately.
Yeah.
But in my experience, I've only ever seen people try and measure it as part of a value stream mapping exercise. It's not something that I've seen people try and record in a system or report on out of the data that they have. Have you ever seen anyone do that?
So there are various ways you might be able to get this type of data. And by the way, the first time I actually heard the term handback, which was, I used to have a different way to describe when workflows backward, was actually from Al Shalloway. So Al kind of, as far as I know, coined that term. There's a handoff and then a hand back. So just wanted to say that's where I'd first heard that. But so there's a few ways, and one of the ways to sort of see when work is going backwards is, yes, in the tools we're using, we can sort of use some of the data. One of the other ways that is a little more manual, but also ensures somebody's looking at it, is if we're visualizing our work, for instance, using Kanban boards, and we're taking regular screenshots of those Kanban boards, and we stick them somewhere like a Miro board or a Lucid Spark board, right? That brings an opportunity to do a very quick visual comparison of where some of the work is flowing forward or backwards, or it's going backwards and forwards more often than we think. So there are ways to get out of tools. Last week, Steve had mentioned, some of the metrics we can get out of tools. That's a good thing for AI to possibly be sort of monitoring, so we don't have to be dealing with that. But some of these more manual techniques that really take a minimal amount of time, but keep a high level of engagement, ensure somebody's actually looking at that, are also ways that I found to be quite beneficial.
Yeah.
So I can't believe we've had a little bit more times going on than we normally have in these flow shorts. So before this becomes a flow long,
Yeah.
I'll see, Helen, anything else, any other metrics or tips that you'd like to
I think
share?
it's a massive topic, isn't it? I think we've done
is.
well to cover the ground we have in 16 minutes. But yeah, I'm always open to have discussions about metrics. For me, flow metrics are obviously incredibly important. They're the efficiency metrics, but I really like to talk about the effectiveness metrics as well. So the value realization, the actual customer experience metrics, they're the ones that are going to also change the needle on the business outcome. You need to be able to deliver what your customer wants, of course, and at speed would be nice, but we need to ensure that it's what they wanted in the first place.
Yeah. So all of you out there that are watching this live or on replay, in the chat, we've got the link to the blog post that this flow short was inspired by. If you have any questions, if you have any of metrics that you like to use and you'd like to share, by all means, please post a comment on that. And we will see you next week. It'll be Helen and I again next Wednesday at the same time, covering a new topic within our flow shorts. The information for the Value Stream Management Consortium is also in the chat, and be looking for the hashtag FlowMoMay.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.